The perjury trial of baseball's home run king, Barry Bonds, has been delayed indefinitely. Mr. Bonds was expected to stand trial on Monday, but late today, federal prosecutors postponed the trial while they tried to get some of their key evidence to be admitted. Why am I telling you this? Why is there baseball in your news show? Well, first of all, it's kind of a big deal. The man on trial for lying about steroid use is Barry Bonds, the guy with more home runs than anyone. More home runs than Hank Aaron, more Hank runs than Babe Ruth, more home runs than anybody, most home runs ever, even most home runs in a single season. If home run hitting were a website, Barry Bonds would be Google. If home run hitting were being a superpower, he'd be the USA. So first of all, this is our national pastime, and he is a really big deal. Second of all, there's the whole faith in the justice system thing. Barry Bonds has always widely been understood as a baseball villain, a bad guy, rude to the fans, mean to the sports writers, selfish among his teammates. That is the rap on Barry Bonds, and it is not a good one. Does that have anything to do with why he's the one going on trial and how this trial's been going thus far? Here now, my friend, the sports writer Dave Zirin, sports correspondent with The Nation magazine and author of The People's History of Sports in the United States. Dave, so nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Rachel.
So tell me this.
Yes.
Why do so many people hate Barry Bonds?
Well, they hate Barry Bonds because they see him as one step below a pit bull fighting banker at this point. I mean, he has a reputation as being somebody who's not good to his teammates. There's a great quote by one of his teammates who says, when Barry says bleep you, the difference is he really means it. But I think the thing about Barry Bonds is that there are two kinds of people in this world. There's Sean Penn people and Tom Hanks people. And Barry Bonds is a Sean Penn person. He's absolutely brilliant. He's surly with the press. He's surly with fans. But at the same time, he's brilliant at his craft. And you know what I like? I like Barry Bonds because he tells uncomfortable truths like Sean Penn. I mean, he was quoted during the beginnings of the steroid trial as saying, why do people care about this and not about what's happening in New Orleans with Hurricane Katrina? Why do people care about this and not the fact that there's a war going on in Iraq? And the response from the press was to say, ooh, look at Barry, he's dodging the question. My response was to say, you know what? Those are pretty good questions that deserve to be answered, perhaps.
Yeah, well, on this, in terms of the latest news on this trial, it's going to be delayed. We thought it was going to go forward on Monday. Who benefits from the delay of the trial? Does Barry benefit from that, or does the prosecution benefit?
On one level, Barry Bonds delays it because Barry Bonds benefits because it's tremendous admission by the prosecution that they were walking in there with no case. Remember, the Justice Department wins 95% of the time when they bring these cases to trial. This was going to be one of those 5% because Judge Susan Ilston, she struck down most of the prosecution's case because she saw the prosecution as having used the Bill of Rights basically as dental floss during the whole process of trying to gather evidence. And that's the thing about this case, is that it stinks to high heaven. And that's why it's, I think, important for MSNBC viewers to understand this. Because Barry Bonds is only the most public face of a process over the last 7 years where the Justice Department just ran roughshod over people's rights. I mean, remember the last time I was on the show, it was to talk about the Maryland State Police spying on me and my friends and for doing anti-death penalty tablings in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Yeah. And I know you know about the case of Sami Al-Arian, the college professor in Florida who's been in American gulag hell for giving money to a Palestinian charity. And Barry Bonds is the most public face of the way John Ashcroft and then Alberto Gonzales and George W. Bush handled their business. They ran roughshod over the Bill of Rights. And in Barry Bonds' case, it's particularly egregious every step of the way. I mean, their case, in the discovery process, this is what Judge Susan Ilston had such a problem with. I mean, you had IRS agents walking into a confidential drug testing labs with warrants that said, we can get 10 people's results. And they leave with 4,000. 4,000 people's results. And a three-judge panel afterwards were judging the actions of this particular agent, a man named Jeff Nowitzki, and what they said was, gee, I didn't know the Fourth Amendment was repealed. No one told us about that.
But what people, if you're not a sports fan, if you haven't been following the steroids trial, steroids scandal closely, what you've grokked thus far is everybody in baseball is on steroids, and that makes me feel bad about our national pastime, and athletes are spoiled and get away with everything.
The players are scapegoated to a profound degree. I spoke to a player who I'm not going to reveal his name, but he's somebody who's been caught up in this mess, and he said to me, why is it that punishment is an individual issue, but distribution is a team issue? And I pressed him about what he meant about that, and it means that whenever there's a punishment, it's all about the individual. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Alex Rodriguez. But in the process, when baseball was hitting home runs and there were commercials that said chicks dig the long ball and everybody was making a ton of money and everybody looked like pro wrestlers, owners weren't asking questions, front office people weren't asking questions, managers weren't asking questions. I mean, steroids weren't even a banned substance in baseball till 2003. But you could go back to 1988, the first time a trainer raised at an owners meeting, you know what, there's some substances here that maybe shouldn't be in the game. So there's a hyper scapegoating that goes on in the sport while owners are getting off scot-free.
So you're saying that baseball as an industry benefited from steroid use knowingly, and now has decided to turn on specific players, scapegoat players, as a way of sort of excusing their own complicity in it.
There's an old expression, Rachel, and that's follow the money. 1995, after the baseball strike, the rights to baseball sold, the whole package, the TV rights, $500 million. The playoff rights alone in 2003 sold for $2.6 billion, I believe. And that was all built on the home run. The home run became the most marketable thing in baseball over that period. And the 1998 home run race, for example, between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, I mean, this was something that was followed by the entire country. The owners loved it. The union loved it. The money was flowing. The problem now is that the chickens have really come home to roost. And there was an article by George Vesey in the New York Times just the other day about how players have showed up to spring training this year, all looking noticeably thinner.
Yeah, they all got tiny little hats now.
Yeah. They all look like they're wearing zoot suits now. They're 1940s Los Angelinos.
And so steroids, so the players are juicing less. Some players are getting scapegoated. The Justice Department rode roughshod here, and Barry Bonds' case is more than it appears.
Absolutely.
Dave Zirin, sports correspondent with The Nation magazine, author of A People's History of Sports in the United States. It's great to see you, Dave. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. It was a tough task to follow Tim LaHaye, but I'm glad I could do it.
I understand. I would like to see you follow him, literally.
Oh, yeah.